I believe we're close to starting time, and I would like to welcome all of our members today to our very first mayoral candidate conversation. We are here today with Daniel Caldwell, or he likes to be called DC, so you may hear me call him that, and Frank Tilley, who is our treasurer for the board of directors. Now, this was a closed session of the members of Fort Worth Sister Cities International so that we can get to know the candidates and that the candidates can get to know us. I'm going to do a brief overview for DC, Mr. Caldwell, and he will then have a 15-minute window to talk with you about his platform. We will then turn it over to Frank Tilley, who will do question and answers with Mr. Caldwell. If you will look at the bottom of your screens, you should see a little box almost in the center that is Q&A. If you would put your questions in that box, Frank will be sure to get them to DC. So first of all, let me welcome you, DC. We're delighted that you agreed to visit with us. But I know I sent you some information before just so that we could familiarize you a little bit with Sister Cities if you were not very familiar with it. But as you may know, Sister Cities manages the International Sister Cities program for the city of Fort Worth. And this program was started over 35 years ago to promote Fort Worth internationally. Fort Worth Sister Cities is the only city organization that is dedicated solely to promoting Fort Worth internationally and enriching our community through international education, exchanges, and commerce. We do a lot for this city. Some other organizations in Fort Worth have stepped back from a more global role, and Sister City desires to increase our presence in this arena by becoming a center for international relations for the entire city. We manage, on behalf of the city, its sister city relationships with 9 cities across the world, and we have an incredible network that reaches almost every country in the world beyond our own sister city relationships. Our programming is focused on connecting people around the world and to promoting Fort Worth and to broaden people's knowledge of the world in a way to promote peace and goodwill and friendships. We focus most of our effort on student education through travel experiences in person. Of course, we're not doing that right now. We're doing most of our things through virtual opportunities. And we're proud of the diversity of our students. We have an incredibly rich group of students, both racially and economically. We also offer adult travel experiences in virtual education with our sister cities in other countries. So that's just a little synopsis of what we do on a regular basis in this relationship with this city. Let me now introduce Daniel Caldwell, DC. Daniel earned a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering with a minor in mathematics from Texas A&M University and a law degree from Texas Southern University's Thurgood Marshall School of Law in 2019. His experience includes work as an engineering group operations sergeant for the Texas State Guard and as an educator for the Austin, Birdville, Crowley, and Freer school districts. He has also served as a bilingual early voting clerk, a volunteer deputy voter registrar, and an election day judge. So he's familiar about this election system, I gather. So we're going to give Mr. Caldwell now about 15 minutes just to speak to us about his platform and his understanding and desire to work with sister cities in this international arena. DC, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, Should I save your questions for the end, or you want me to answer them during this block of time now?
I think we will do the questions at the end. Just feel
All right.
free to talk about your platform.
Well, your email talked about it as a presentation, but I prefer the conversational approach. I have my background in international interest. I took French and Spanish in high school and then German in college. I was one of the orientation leaders for the international students who attended Texas A&M University. I was a ambassador for the law school, which also welcomed the new students, both those who were local and those who came from out of country to study law in Texas. As a student at Parker University, I prompted the university administration there to begin posting a translation of the school's values into Spanish, since I could do the translation myself and know that, especially in value statements, there's often a lot lost in translation. I have been functionally bilingual for a long time. My Spanish, I would say, is still not perfect, but, well, native Spanish speakers tell me I do a great job. Sorry, my French and German is still what I would consider to be novice level. As far as international relations go, the Thurgood Marshall School of Law has its area of emphasis in international and immigration law. My electives in law school were immigration law. I am familiar with the process of getting a visa to, one, leave the country. That's generally easier than the process of, two, getting a visa to come into the country. I know about the consistency with which the federal government does and does not follow the immigration laws, as well as the consistency with which they enforce them. As far as trying to promote international relations for the city itself, well, Fort Worth is part of the DFW Metroplex. We are not a standalone island. We are part of a network of cities. We are in a hub, and it's that hub of DFW, the air travel, as well as the other local airports that connect us to the greater world besides the internet, that really is our tool to maintaining and building commerce and the local economy, as well as the local culture, since Fort Worth has been, in some respects, a tourism hub with its museums, with its botanical gardens, with the stockyards. And I'm not referring to the agriculture part so much as the cultural center north of downtown. That is an attraction which brings people here to visit, but in part of trying to be part of an international community, we also have a lot of immigrants who've come here legally and otherwise from other countries. They are part of our population. They're part of our identity and who we are. And we appreciate them, the time and effort, the work that they put in to maintaining and building the community we have. In terms of how do I want to leverage their presence and those assets, well, I will admit that I'm generally more interested in helping the neighbor next door than the starving children in Africa, simply because the homeless guy on the street is within my sphere of influence. So in the sister cities being an international organization, that's about expanding our sphere of influence and doing what is actually within our capacity to do. What is within our capacity to do is to encourage uh, companies that might hire local residents to establish an office, a branch here in Fort Worth. You can start that with a phone call, a letter, and a conversation. Um, I I opposed the idea of building Trump's wall, although he has his pros and cons. I think it would be more important to build bridges than walls. So, or even infrastructure like putting down power lines or a railway. We we need to build connections, both locally and abroad, and that's more into my philosophy than specific objectives, because my primary objectives are to focus on the health and welfare of the residents in Fort Worth. As taxpayers, they have a vested interest in seeing that the mayor and city council faithfully steward those dollars in planning the city budget. I fancy myself a fiscal conservative, but there are projects that I'd like to spend money on, like, for example, building bridges. And then we need to be responsive to just the suggestions and concerns of our constituents. I admit that you don't necessarily have to be a resident of Fort Worth to have an interest in Fort Worth and have your voice heard. Uh, so I'm not trying to push my agenda on the city or on anyone. It's my intent and interest to, well, I'm a volunteer. I understand that the mayor of Fort Worth makes, in the $29,000 a year salary, $14 an hour if you treat it like a full-time job, and even less than that if you work overtime. And for those who came in late or later than the technology check-in, I have volunteered for assignments that had me working nights and weekends, with thank you as the primary compensation. I was a clerk for a church that had spent 2 years without one. And so in 6 months, I did the catch up of everything that should have been done in the prior year. And that was while working full-time as a high school teacher, where it's not a 40-hour week job. It's 60 hours in the classroom if you're holding tutorials and inviting parents in for conferences. I'm not afraid of the hours. I look forward to being able to work with people from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. And I do try to pay attention to details and look for room for improvement, since I don't just like the idea of change. I cringe at the idea of change because worse is a change too. I do want change. I want change for the better. I want improvement. So I ask you what you'd like to see improved and not just different. I think we're getting close on my 15 minutes. Am I right?
You could probably have about another 5 minutes would be fine.
Oh, well.
That would be fine.
Well,
And let me just ask you this then, before we turn it over to Frank for the formal Q&A. You just mentioned that uh, you like to volunteer, and that's admirable as a full-time high school teacher, as your profession now. How you know, the mayor of Fort Worth is a full-time job, basically. You know, how will
you can do both.
how will you manage that?
You can do both. You do one or the other.
Okay. Well, Frank, do you want to go
They,
ahead?
they are mutually exclusive. I understand that.
Okay.
You don't have to continue the same thing from year to year. The idea is to continually progress. It's a step in the evolution of a lifetime.
Absolutely. Well, Frank, why don't we? I mean, I think we have some very good
I
questions.
think there was a misconception.
Okay.
The misconception, currently I'm not working as a full-time high school teacher. I've been subbing for Fort Worth ISD, and last fall I worked for the census, and I worked for the Susan B. Anthony list. And so while I'm an educator for Fort Worth ISD, I'm not full-time. I've had interviews for full-time positions, but there's a lot of bureaucracy in that. And I understand one of the roles of it, the mayor as an administrator, is to identify unnecessary red tape and get things done. Sorry to interrupt you, but
No, absolutely.
No, that's great.
I didn't want someone to believe something that wasn't true.
Thank you for that clarification. So you talked a little bit about your views of the immigration and international citizens of Fort Worth. But as you think about your agenda, is promoting Fort Worth internationally part of that agenda? And if so, what are your goals related to doing so?
Well, so yes, promoting Fort Worth internationally is on the to-do list. Specifically, Fort Worth has world-class educational institutions. UNT has its med school, it's actually an osteopathic school. TCU, Texas Wesleyan, what I affectionately call SWIBITS, Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, brings people from all over the country to get a degree in religion. But we have our educational institutions. We need our businesses to bring jobs, both for local residents and for new residents. The focus has to be there on having them come because, well, in our economy, we rely on cash flow in order to maintain a quality of life, and not just quality of life, but to maintain basic services. I know the power went out for a lot of people. I lost running water. It's going to be necessary to continue to have people come to Fort Worth and bring their skill sets, bring their wallets, bring their families with them, and become a permanent part of the community. In terms of specific programs, I know that the Arts Council, and I agree, there should be more outdoor art. That would be on a quality of life thing. I don't really want to spend money on it so much as make it easier to get a permit for it. Would I want to help sponsor people to come to Fort Worth from other countries or on the domestic level, other states? Well, bring their skill sets, bring their investment to Fort Worth. And yes, part of the reason for having an international interest is because we expect a return on investment from our interest in other cities and countries. We invest in them, we want them to invest in us, so that, as it were, even if we're 1,000 miles apart, we can grow together. Does that make sense?
Yes. So, you know, a little bit of, I mean, we've told you a little bit about what Fort Worth Sister Cities does, but we've really, as May said earlier, some of the other organizations and leadership organizations in the city have really stepped back from their international role. We want and are trying to position ourselves as a Center for International Relations for Fort Worth to facilitate those conversations that you talked about. But are there other things that you see that we can do as an organization to support your agenda?
Well, I see that Sister Cities provides scholarships to students studying abroad and foreign students studying here. If Sister Cities would collaborate not just with the city, but with corporations that would want to send not just students to study, but interns, help place students on international internships, jobs, that would be, I think, a good fit and function for the sister cities as not really a brokerage or a clearinghouse, but sometimes to fill that kind of role of at the various, I don't want to say job fairs, but networking groups have opportunities you've identified that you'd like local residents to take advantage of internationally. And then we can identify employment and internship opportunities in Fort Worth to advertise to our partners across the globe. That seems like the niche that I would want to see y'all fill. I understand helping students study. All conversations generally begin one-on-one on an individual basis, even if they have a communal or international impact. The way I would want to see that impact had is that when people work, they have all the clients they interact with, they have their supervisor that they probably deal with more than most students talk to their professors. And that's more the kind of leverage that I would want to leverage and role that I wouldn't want to see the sister cities organization expand to.
Great, thank you. So we really appreciate your time today, and we wish you the best in your campaign. May, do you have anything else to add?
I too, thank you so much, DC. It was lovely meeting you, getting to know you in this way. Hopefully, in the future, you can learn more about our organization, be part of it. For all of our guests, I want to remind you that May 1st is Election Day. We encourage you to vote, whether it's for DC or one of the other candidates. It's our responsibility, so make sure May 1st is on your calendars.
April 19th.
I'm so sorry, I had it written wrong. You are correct. Thank you. And I want to remind you as well that the next candidate conversation is Monday, this coming Monday, March 15th, with City Councilwoman Ann Zeta at 4 o'clock. If you have not RSVP'd yet, please let Danielle know and she'll be sure to send you the link for that one. And then after that conversation, we have them scheduled with Maddie Parker, Deborah Peoples, Steve Panatti, Cedric Kanyenda, and Councilman Brian Byrd. So stay tuned and join us in these future conversations. And again, DC, thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to be with us, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Y'all were a priority.
Thank you.
I
Thank
feel
you
like
very much.
the
Thanks, everybody.
Q&A part was more informal than I was expecting, but that was fun.
Good.
Great.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Should I leave the meeting or do y'all want to
Yeah.
kick me out?
Just hit that button and you're gone.
We're all gone.
We're all gone. Bye.
Bye.